Thank, yeah. So, if you are comfortable with standing panel all across the stage, if you are not comfortable, you are also welcome to join another section. We'll work on trickling a few more CSM, but it might be tough, tight space to fit in all those chairs. So work on that, but we want to get started and want to be conscious of your time. So with that, I will pass into our moderator, Fred.
So good afternoon. Wait, okay. So I don't know if anybody's ever been in a room with me, but good morning, good afternoon, good night, hello, goodbye, or call and response. And we're here at a conference on social connection. And I just tried to socially connect with you, and everybody just turned off their ear. So we're going to try it again. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm Fred Riley. Professional title, I'm the executive director of Weave, the social fabric project at the Aspen Institute. But my most favorite titles and more coveted are favorite, and I'll say this first, favorite son, brother, uncle, nephew, godfather. Listen, those are titles that I wear like a badge of honor, that I get to show up for people in my life. And more importantly, the work that I get to do for showing up, honoring and supporting people who are showing up in communities is because of the community that I grew up in. I grew up in one of those forgotten about Midwestern communities, Saginaw, Michigan. Used to have 250,000 people. We're down to 27,000. And a city that used to be, a industrial boom town, but now is a little battered, and it's battered. But the people have always been its prize. And I am here standing on the shoulders of those people. And so I take the people of Saginaw, Michigan with me everywhere I go. My childhood pastor who told me I could be important, and my fifth grade teacher who told me I was smart and I should go to a gifted and talented program, and my high school English teacher who knew for me college wasn't just a rite of passage, but it was a way for me to change the world. And so they show up with me every single day. And so I stand here as Reverend Austin, Sharon Smith, and Sharon Floyd. And so I greet you on behalf of them. We're here today to talk, and I won't talk about doom and gloom because we know about the stats of social isolation and what it's doing to society. But I want to talk about what's bright, right? Service is one of the ways, in my opinion, that we can bring people together. When David Brooks, the New York Times author, founded Weave, the Social Fabric Project, he traveled all around the countries to communities like the one that I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, and he found people. He found people who were showing up in service to their community, and he found that service was bringing people together. It was bridging divides, and it was ending some loneliness and isolation in those communities. And so, what if, as we are thinking about the work that we're doing, what if we are thinking about Okay, I don't know if we can do that. Oh, is it? What about now? Yeah, it's up as high as it goes. Uh, okay. What? See, now you just threw me off. Thanks. Um,
Oh,
what if we looked at every opportunity to connect as an opportunity to build connections in isolation in communities? Right now, service is one of those things that's dwindling, so less and less people are volunteering in person, and it's become a checkbox. If you handle volunteering at your organization, it's probably on top of another big job, and you just have time to count bodies. You might count hours, but what about connections? And so I'm joined by these amazing panelists who are thinking about how we can actually support communities and how we can end isolation through service. And I'll start first, and I'll introduce each person at a time with a question. But first, I'll start with Aaron. Aaron, you are a social entrepreneur. My mother gave me these readers because I'm having some issues with my vision. So I'm gonna put them on so I can see the page. Aaron, you're a social entrepreneur who has dedicated your life to building communities. 25 years ago, you founded the Taproot Foundation. I was just at that conference last week, which helps connect people, social causes with skilled volunteers to strengthen organizations and communities. And you're the author of the Purpose Economy. Now you're the founder and CEO of the Chamber of Connection, a national nonprofit working to reverse the decline of trust and connection in cities everywhere. What prompted you to lead a life focused on connection and service?
thank you.
You're welcome.
Whoop, am I covering the microphone?
Yeah.
Learning how it works. So, little learning curve on this. Great to be here and love partnering with the Foundation for Social Connection in this work. To your question about sort of origins, really for me, it was family. My grandfather, when I was probably like 6 or 7, took me to his closet in his apartment. And this is not like a Boy Scout story, so don't worry. And he pulled out of like this box a piece of paper, and on the top of it said Adolf Hitler. he then told me the story of how he was one of the first naval officers in Hitler's bunk at the end of the war, and he had stolen this piece of paper off of his desk. And he then told the story of how he, after the war, through the Marshall Plan, despite being of Jewish descent, despite so many of our people dying in the Holocaust, actually partnered with Nazis to rebuild Germany. He was able to actually work with people who had killed our people to actually rebuild Germany. And one of the greatest, I think, achievements in American history of rebuilding Germany, so that has been a pillar of democracy ever since. And then he went on to work for President Kennedy and created the Peace Corps, and then we in Aspen for about 25 years in the very early days. And that really, to me, was an inspiration around how do we connect people through shared purpose? How do we get people who come from different worlds to come together through something that they want to achieve together? And to me, to hear the story of like the Jewish leader being able to work with literally with Nazis to be able to rebuild Germany, if we can do that, like we can do anything. And I've really spent my career looking at ways to build service as a way to help create bridges, to help us be able to do more than we think we can do. And it's just been amazing to see how people, when you challenge them to rise to their best self, how many people do that.
Wow. Thank you for that, Aaron. I've heard your story, but I've never heard that story. So that's amazing. Shana, I'd like to introduce you next, and it's going to be weird because I'm going to pass these down and pass it back. But Shana, you've been working for decades in the public sector on and volunteer engagement. You most recently served as the director of Engage Arkansas, where you helped to launch the state's first statewide volunteer portal in Arkansas, a collegiate service network, and Engage City certification program. Now you're the chief program officer at the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute, where you've helped to launch Civic Arkansas, a program dedicated to civic engagement and help. Tell us about a moment that impacted you where you saw community being formed through service. And we'll do that all the way down.
Okay. Goodness. And yeah, decades ages me. I was thinking about that, and it's been 37 years.
You put this in the bio, so I read it. So it's
But it's been a great career. One, I landed here because I grew up overseas. So my parents were missionaries. I moved every 2 years. So at the time I resented that. Didn't think that was fun. But in hindsight, looking back, realized just the rich depth of community and culture that I got exposed to early on in my life, and how that just sort of, I lived in a culture where people accepted each other. And I was around a lot of civil servants that ran humanitarian organizations, around a lot of military people. And of course, being in a family of faith and my parents serving, was taught service, and was in baccalaureate high schools, where service and service learning was a key component of every class I took. So when I came back to the States, I graduated high school overseas, came back to the States. My parents were still overseas. I didn't know anybody at the college I went to. And so I had always, part of my coping mechanism, honestly, had been getting engaged in service, because that was the fastest way to make friends. It was an entry point into community wherever I was. And so I practiced that. And then I think as I graduated and went into service, I was fortunate to have some really good mentors who took me in early in my career, and gave me seats at tables that I frankly should have been at age 24 or 25. And they really nurtured me. And in my very first job, I was working at a mental health facility for youth at risk, and they had no volunteer program. And so I was asked to start a volunteer program. Daunting task for a 24-year-old. But I didn't know any better, and I assumed that people would just want to help and serve. And so we launched a volunteer program, and surprisingly, but also proudly, by the end of the first year, we had 60 volunteers for our organization. And I remember that moment in time stuck with me, one, because people believed that I had the capacity to do it. They laid out a roadmap to help me. Second, I didn't know anything to do other than to just ask people and connect with them. And so that's what I did, and it worked. So that forever stayed in my mind. And then when I saw just the power of the connection that happened with volunteers and the youth, I was hooked. Like I knew then I was never leaving the field. This is where I was going to stay. This was the work I was going to do.
Wow. Thank you, Shannon. I was going to say, you said you did that at 24, so that means just a couple of years later? Okay, just wanted to make sure everybody could do the math. So, Aisha,
Yes.
you're a mom, you're the co-founder, a wife, let me make sure, because you'll check me on this later. You're the co-founder of the Resident Association of Greater Englewood, RAGE. Instead of leaving your community, the one that you at some point feared, you decided to stay. You decided to stay and commit to the people around you. For the last 15 years, you've watched neighbors come together through service to each other and transform the entire neighborhood. And I've been to your neighborhood, and before I could get to your door, somebody called and said, "Who is this man?" And so she's the trusted leader in her community. But tell us about your community and what you're doing to foster connection through service in Englewood.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Happy to be here.
Hold on. What? Use that.
Oh,
Thank you. We're gonna have some nouns here.
better again. I'm from Chicago, so Chicago a little bit more rowdy than hello. How are they? Okay. Glad to be here. Always excited to share my journey. I would say, now in hindsight, looking back 15 years, I cannot believe what we did as a volunteer association. My background was a little corporate. I was on Michigan Avenue, the Mag Mile, in Chicago at a real estate association, which was the Institute of Real Estate Management, which was IREM for short. And so I'm in this world of associations and I'm learning that it's an association for an association. And so in my eyes, association was already stepping up to say, I want to be part of something. I want to be part of something that we both agree upon, that we both have a shared interest, and I am joining this association. And it is an association everywhere. And so I didn't think that the journey on the Mag Mile would lead me to start a neighborhood association. I had issues on my block, as Fred said, to the point that I was going to move here to Georgia, actually. The majority of my father's side of the family migrated back to Georgia from Chicago, and we came and visit, and the housing in 2008 was gorgeous, and I was looking in Villa Rica, and I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to really plant my roots here in Georgia. And something hit me on my block that made me say, I cannot stay. I cannot go. It was really this little girl who was across the street in a vacant lot, playing in the dirt with a dress on, clear as day, playing in the dirt. And I said, it's no way that I could get up and leave and allow this to happen on my block. And so I started on the block, and because I am eager, as my mom said, I've been organizing since 6. I organized my birthday parties. I've organized dance groups. I've organized all kind of things that make people connect depending on what their interest is. And so why not apply that same skill to our neighborhood? And I didn't know the seeds that we would plant 15 years ago when we started the journey. Englewood is the most electrifying neighborhood in the city of Chicago because of the connections we made. And what I noticed with our work was my gift was organizing, but everyone else had different gifts. And I used that to be a part to build the association. So if you was a photographer, if you bake cookies, if you was a DJ, you did whatever you love doing, that's what you do with this association to uplift our community. And that just has grown. I'm overwhelmed now because we're celebrating in about 3 weeks. And so the reflection of all that work of connections is just, don't mind me if I get teary-eyed. Okay. But yes, that is what I'm doing in Chicago.
Wow. So oftentimes in service, and I get an opportunity to travel around the country a bit, and I've viewed a bunch of places that are doing volunteer service, and most of the time it's people who believe they're doing service for and not necessarily with. Until I visited this center in Milwaukee called Kinship. And I always get excited to tell Kinship's story because they are the first persons to peak this idea with me that service can be mutual. And so the first persons receiving the service and delivering the service, they see them as the same people. They see it as reciprocal, right? And if every moment in volunteering became a moment of connection, it could be a vital to force to rebuild our neighborhoods, heal divides, could also bring you together and in isolation. And so, what's the biggest challenge in your work when it comes to creating a culture of mutuality, and how did you overcome it? I'll start with Shanna and we'll come all the way down to the end, okay?
It's just easier for the mic to travel, man.
What's the biggest challenge in your work when it comes to creating a culture of mutuality, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, goodness. I'll probably speak to some past work and to some current work. One, I think to your point, we can often fall into thinking about volunteerism, and the reality is historically in our country, volunteerism was a act of privilege. And I think we don't talk about that enough and recognize the impact of that on our industry. Um, and so it was a privilege. Typically, and historically, as it started, it was white women who were not working, who had social means and capital and finances to give their time. And it's evolved somewhat, but I think there are still some connotations. I think one, um, we have to be mindful of the language. I think we have to be mindful of how we speak about what we want people engaged in. I'm a little bit of a proponent of moving away from the term volunteerism to engagement, and just opening the door for people to engage with one another. And I think that carries a different connotation with it. Um, I think also we have a mindset often, and especially in faith community, and I can say that being a member of faith community, where we get a little bit of the white hero or the Jesus hero mindset that we're serving because we're going to come in and fix. And I think we have to be really mindful as leaders in this space that it is a mutual. We have volunteers do have gifts and talents to share, but so do the people who need the support. And they often have more to give and to share. And really, it's more an approach of instead of coming in to help fix a problem, how do we empower and equip them to have their own agency, to equip themselves and begin to take those steps. And so I think it's important to kind of think about that, be mindful of those um, mindsets that can exist in the history of volunteerism in this country, and then addressing that, thinking that through as we create our programs and as we create our invitations to people. I think one of the key things to do, and we had an opportunity to do this when I was working with CASA, was another organization founding a state CASA office in Arkansas. We really were certain that we included families and children that were going to be represented as we sat down to talk about what were the needs they had, what were the kind of people who could help them have agency. So I think that's another thing we don't do often. We get in a hurry, or to your point earlier, volunteers are assigned to the person who's also the fundraiser, or who's also the case manager, or it's the receptionist, and it's the tag on task at an organization often. And we fail to take the time to kind of stop and seek the input and engage the people that we are supporting, working with, to help us define and identify the best roles and the best people to come in. In our work I do now at the Institute, we are in rural communities, just trying to get citizens to re-engage at the local level. We also have a grant from the Lilly Foundation through the University of the Ozarks, where we are working with congregations to get congregates to become involved in civic life in their rural communities. And I think the key there, Ben, is we have to have them at the table. So we have done listening sessions across the state, where we have just honored their voice. We've asked them what they would like to contribute, how they would like to do that. So again, it's having the people that you're wanting to serve, work alongside, empower, and equip at the table to help define the program.
It's not. Let me read it again.
Yes.
Listen, I gave had these questions before. I want you to know that. What's big? You said that they did not change. No, this time. What? Sorry. Okay. So I like to have fun too. So sorry. What's the biggest challenge in your work when it comes to creating a culture of mutuality, and how did you overcome it?
Thank you for that question. And I did see that, so I said in advance. So I'll just tell you about our community in general. Englewood is considered, in the news, the worst community. Unemployment rate, life expectancy is compared to Streeterville and downtown is about 20 years difference. We have all the ills that many urban cities or urban communities have. And so we actually have a influx of volunteers from corporate America, nonprofits, people from out of the country. And they always, and I always say this, we are very Googleicious. So people Google Englewood and we pop up. And so people have always reached out to help us or to volunteer or to do to us charity. And our work is really about empowerment. And so a lot of times those type of opportunities don't work for a group like Rage because the type of volunteer work that we do is what we're passionate about. And so it doesn't feel like we never, and I'm thinking about it, we were all volunteers. We never used the word volunteer. But I served as the president without a salary for 11 years, right? And I just was volunteer. I didn't realize I was volunteering. But I love what I did, and we love the work that we did. And so the challenges were really kind of warring off those kind of one-stop shops that come into Englewood and actually working with folks on a deeper level and telling them, our motto at Rage is connect, build, take action. So the connect is first. We don't do any actions. I don't care if you want to give away toys or turkeys or whatever the case may be. We are connecting first. Come to our meetings, be in our neighborhood, be at a block party before we, so we could build that relationship, which may take a year, which a lot of folks don't have that kind of time. So I think that's probably been a challenge, but in terms of the people of Rage in the community, they don't see it as volunteerism. They see it as, I want to uplift my community and this is what I can offer. And I know that I'm accepted for that and uplifted for that and celebrated for that. And that has just built so much fire in so many people to continue that work throughout our community.
Come on, Aaron. Now,
Sketching.
I don't know if I answered it.
You did. It's where am I? There's so many challenges. And I was starting off with what you shared. Like I remember when I was first starting Taproot, and I would go out and talk to companies, and they would describe the volunteering they were doing. And I'm like, so what you're doing is like field trips to see poor people, and just by seeing them, you somehow are making an impact. Is that what I'm hearing? I was like, we got to put an end to that. And I heard nonprofits that had rooms that they just had companies come and paint over and over again to keep them out of their hair.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That happens.
See it.
That happens quite a bit at Englewood.
we want to come in with Saturday. Like, well, we're not working on Saturday, but
Yeah.
so I have a slightly different perspective than what you shared around language, or maybe I don't. I think one of the big challenges, we work with a lot of companies and a lot of foundations, and right now connection is not treated as a cause. And if there's like one thing that we need to do to like create the ripple effects, I think about this in terms of systems. We need to make connection a cause. Education, healthcare, environment, connection. Like it has to be at that level, because what's happened structurally is that companies and people want to volunteer, unless it's helping them, it doesn't actually count as volunteering. Unless it's helping them, it doesn't count as philanthropy. And the reality is we have got to put a lot more labor into addressing connection, and we got to put a lot more money into it. And I love that Aspen's now putting money and helping to build connection as a cause through the grant making that you're doing to community builders, to weavers, as you call them, out in the world. I think that's really critical. But I want to build on something else you said, which, thinking back to the 1950s when there was a different, social order, most of it bad. But the one thing that was good was that, the women that you talked about before the full participation in the workforce did an average of 10 to 15 hours a week of service, mostly within their own community. It's the block party. It was the PTA. And as women became part of the workforce, became busier and busier, we've seen a dramatic decline in this work. And doing some sort of back of the envelope, like to match today, that level of contribution to connection in our neighborhoods is about $500 billion in labor. $500 billion in labor. That's what we need to solve for. How do we close the gap on that $500 billion in labor? And we're not going to do it unless we can really build the infrastructure for connection as a cause to enable the structure to exist. So we're working now with companies to help them use us as a nonprofit so that they can then count the block party. They can then count what people are doing in their neighborhood, because we've got to figure out how to mobilize $500 billion in labor if we're going to actually be able to reproduce that kind of connection that we once had in our neighborhoods.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. You didn't need the question either, so I'm perfect. In our work at we are thinking a lot about trust. Right now, actually, the work you're doing in Englewood is tough work, especially given the stat that 76% of Americans now believe if given the opportunity, their neighbor will take advantage of them. And so that's a lack of trust, right? So how many of y'all believe that is trust? That it is hard to hate a person that you know? You haven't met my cousins. But what I'll say is that bringing people together and getting them to trust one another is key to doing this work. And so as you're thinking about the work you're doing, what did you do to build trust in Englewood? And what's the breakthrough in trust that happened in Englewood as you were doing it?
Wow. Miss Jean Carter Hill.
Oh.
So I'll start with her. God rest her soul. While I started my journey, I was working on Michigan Avenue. I was corporate. I was the same way. Oh, I want to volunteer in Englewood. I want to organize and do something. So I literally went on volunteers.org to find communities. I don't even know. Does that exist still? Is that? Oh, okay. So I went there.
They're here.
Yeah, they are here. Oh, okay, good. And so I went there and I found Imagining a What If, an organization that was ran by Miss Jean Carter Hill. And I'm in my 30s, and so I'm very eager to help. And I signed up, we matched, and I came in, and she was so leery of me and did not trust me and thought someone sent me, that I was a plant. And I'm trying to explain to her, I live in the community. I'm a homeowner here. My grandparents are from here. I'm giving her all the stats, like I'm Englewood proud, and she did not trust me. And it was hard to really win over this, elder who was a pillar in the community. And so I really paused on, the journey of let me just help. And I observed and I was quiet. And I kind of let her tell me where she needed support instead of me saying, oh, I can type this up. I could do this, and just overwhelming her. I sat back and connected. And so the reason that connect, build, take action is so important is because even me as a resident, as a homeowner, want to give back. I did good on my block. I want to do more in the community. I didn't have trust initially. And I think after me connecting with her, I connected with other councils that was in Englewood. It was a council of elders that I had to kind of, listen to them and observe. And that I took that model to connect with others. And I told others, just come in and observe. Let's really take our time to build this relationship. And so it was a challenge initially, but I think now looking down, I know that Miss Jean Carter Hill is with me right now, looking down. So thank you.
Aaron, a question to you. And there's often, and I think about the work that we do at the Aspen Institute, and there's often this disconnect between local work on the ground and like this big national ivory tower, right? And in partnership with the Foundation for Social Connection, you just launched Volunteering Reconnection to rally the field around this new vision for service. And we think the same thing. So can you tell us more about how people can join this movement, what it is, and how do you think this is going to be one of the magic bullets to bring people back together?
No, appreciate it. Before I answer that, I did want to show on that trust piece. One of my favorite case studies or stories was the Mozilla Foundation in San Francisco as part of their leadership development program. They didn't tell people what they're doing. They just put all these execs in a bus and they drove them like 45 minutes, just dropped them off at the corner of the street. And like they said, go find a way to help somebody.
Oh, wow.
We're like, wait a sec, he didn't line us. Like, no, you got to go earn the right to help somebody.
Wow.
And I was like, that is leadership. That was amazing that they did it that way. Doesn't exactly address what you were describing, but I think in that vein, like we need to each as individuals earn the right to serve, not to assume people want us.
That's scary too. I would have found my way back home. Yeah. If I could fit that way, I thought about it and said I had.
There they had, yeah. So Volunteer Reconnected is a initiative that we launched actually a couple of weeks ago in Silicon Valley. And it is an initiative to really redesign volunteering. So 25 years ago, I did that around skills-based volunteering and building the pro bono service movement. What we're seeing now is that the next evolution needs to be about connection, and that we need to bring all the leaders in service, all the leaders in companies, all the leaders in government together and really redefine volunteering to close this $500 billion gap, but to also change the way we design volunteering. Because today, as you were sharing, it's more and more online. It's more and more sort of short, non-relational forms of service. It's become a lot like the way our work has become. It's like all about efficiency, and it's lost a lot of the humanity that needs to be in that service. So what we're doing as an overall initiative, one is we're just saying, we want everyone to treat connection as a cause. Until we treat connection as a cause, we can't do this systemically. So how do we get companies to recognize that as a field? The second piece is really auditing existing volunteer programs for bonding and bridging social capital to look at how to actually create that difference. And then we're introducing like this whole library of additional ways that employees can serve. So, companies are going to start doing like, we want to have 1,000 employees do block parties in each of their own neighborhoods and actually count that. Because a big part of this is we need to make connection count, because connection right now does not count. And I think our general attitude towards it, like if I were to paraphrase our president, is like winners connect, losers don't. Like that's sort of our general attitude towards, I think, connection, going back to middle school. And I think we need to realize like connection is the only thing that can bring our country back together. It's the only thing in which everyone, rich, poor, whatever color, has a need for connection. It's the only thing in which everyone has a role in solving for the problem. It's literally like the only thing that everyone can have a role in playing, making an impact. And then finally, it's the only thing that you can't do alone. So by definition, if we're going to turn our country around, if we're going to build the country we all want for the next generation, connection is the only way to get there. And we've got to do that through engaging everyone in service, because the act of being a friend is a form of service. The act of being part of a community is a form of service. And we've got to celebrate that. And to your point about national versus, hyper local, we need to build infrastructure, and we need to empower people to sort of make it their own. Yeah. I'm a vegetarian. I eat a lot of tofu. Like tofu is all about the sauce, right? So what we need to do is like manufacture a shit ton of tofu, right? Everyone locally can add their sauce and make it work. But if we don't look at this at a national scale, we're not going to get the change in our culture, and it's culture change that we need.
Yeah. That's dope. Thank you, Aaron. I think about that often. Like I can create all the programs I can, but if the people and the communities don't do them, and they shouldn't be doing my programs because I'm no longer relevant in the community. I live and work in Ivory Tower, and it's just what it is. And so,
but you still have a need for connection.
I do sometimes, right? When I'm not on a plane. So yeah. Shanna, a lot of this work is going to stick as it relates to how people manage volunteers or support volunteers. And so the question says, like, what's the secret sauce? Like, how do you actually pull this together with managing volunteers?
Oh, goodness. And it probably sounds trite to say at this conference and in this room, but I think we have to start with our organizations having cultures of connection. And many of our nonprofits don't. We're busy doing the work, and we don't create culture of connection. So we may have 50 volunteers. Our board members have no clue who those people are or what they do. Our volunteers don't know each other. They're not connection points for each other. And so I think, one, we have to be super mindful of how are we building connection within our organizations for our employees, but also for the people who we are asking to come alongside us in the work. I also think that's a key element. I think that we frequently push out opportunities for ease. The portals and those things, I launched one, are great, but they're not an ask. They're a touch point, typically on a screen, but they are not an ask and they are not a connection point. And so I think we have to, in some ways, go back old school and really be, again, mindful. If we are building cultures of community within our organizations, then we should have those cultural connections within the communities that we serve. And we should be able to have those physical, face-to-face points of contact where we are inviting people into the work. And that invitation of bring your whole self to this work, to share your skills, your gifts, your talents with us reads very differently than asking someone to fill a slot. And so I think that's key as well. And I think, speaking to kind of Erin's point, thinking about corporate volunteerism, which has begun to shift some, and glad to see it doing so, because I do think it was problematic for many years for nonprofits. Cost a lot of money to host a team of 100 people once a year. But I think even there, having those dialogues, asking corporate leaders, asking small business leaders in rural community, because I'm also sort of a bottom-up girl. I believe in rural community. I come from a rural state, so I'm not big on national down, state down. I believe change and movements begin at the local level with local people, and that local decisions are best, and that all politics are local. And so I think it also is having those dialogues as leaders in the community with your small businesses, with your chamber, with your corporations that may be in those towns. Where are your people already engaged? Because to your point, Erin, we don't count the mom that's a leader of a sales team who also tutors at her child's school and serves on PTA. But if we start to have those dialogues with businesses and corporations about where are their citizens already engaged, where are their employees already a part of community. And again, I think sometimes we have to shift the language then, because they're looking for something different when we're talking about that. And help them see the value that brings, and then help make connections for people, pathways into further engagement. I also think we have to be really mindful, and we believe this strongly at the Rockefeller Institute. We have to be really mindful that there is a pathway and sort of a continuum for volunteerism or engagement, and not everyone is ready to jump in, and nor should we invite everybody to jump in and immediately be a tutor or a mentor or whatever we may need. I think we have to be mindful that we want people to be well-informed first. And if we're educating people about the issues in their community, they become informed, then they become concerned, they become more inquisitive, they're curious, they begin to seek out additional information. Then they can be ready to actually engage. And they have found that thing that has piqued their interest. They have found that thing that aligns with their personal values. And they can then begin to take steps to become more engaged. And that's where you then also get that connection. So it's a connection to the people in the organization, to the people you're serving, but it's also a deep connection with self that keeps one motivated to continue to serve. And we also shift away from these sort of sporadic volunteer opportunities or people just testing the waters through volunteerism, and we have these deeper connections.
So I know the folks here are probably looking for some practical tips, like what they could actually go home and do now as it relates if they have service opportunities. Folks ask me this question all the time, and often they say, if you are serving food at a place and you have folks who are coming to receive a meal, how about you tell the folks serving the food to leave the line and go have a meal with a person who's experiencing a meal or experiencing being unhoused or food insecurity, right? Those are some things that we can do to make this work more to build a culture of connection in service opportunities. And so we'll start with you, Shanna. I know you just said we'll come back down this way.
Uh-huh.
So what's some practical tips that the folks here can take back home with them?
I would say make sure you actually know what you need. Again, going back to talking to and engaging people you're serving to be a part of that solution finding. Second, be really clear. I go and trove the volunteer websites, and there's, a number of them. And half the time couldn't really tell you what an organization is asking me to do. It may say one thing, and then when I open it up a little further, it reads a little different. So just be really clear with people what you're looking for, and have that language be concise. I think also, again, we've got to do a better job as organizations giving people feedback about the impact of their work. Because this really is about connection, which I do believe volunteerism at the heart of it and engagement at the heart is about connection. Then we've got to help people see that their connection with the program, with the people they're volunteering with, serving alongside mattered. And we don't close that loop very often. And so we've got to do that and then celebrate that. And again, create those connection opportunities for the people who are engaged with your organization. Have the board of directors serve pancakes to your volunteer group and then sit and eat with them. Create affinity groups within your volunteer program where volunteers can get together for coffee at a coffee shop. And if you just have to kind of provide the space and the time, but they can get together, get to know one another, share their wins, their frustrations, and again, begin to build their own culture of community around something that they have decided to give their time to. And so I think it's also taking the time to do those things, which again just builds that culture of connection.
Tips, practical tips. Let me just see how I can start. Plan joy. That's first. I think regardless of programs and metrics and impact and percentages, joy is a common denominator for humans. Everyone wants it, everyone desires it, everyone enjoys it. And so I think we approach it from joy. We plan joy. I love to hear our members say when they're talking about other people joining, oh, we have a social event and then we have like our real meeting, our civic meetings. And they know that every time that we're going to do something sociable. A lot of times we get rid of the agenda. We who cares about our updates when people really want to connect? They just had an anniversary. They just had a birthday. They just, somebody just got their college degree, and so we celebrate joy and plan joy with everything that we do. I would definitely say co-creation. That is a word that, I mean, my team right now, we co-create too much. We're like in the text group right now, but that's the kind of our way, the Rage way, that anything we do, any program, any initiative, any joy that we plan, we co-create with our members who are really volunteering to be a part of this work. In our community, the desire for leadership and knowledge and resources is important. And so finding opportunities that match with people, if that's what they are interested in, do they want to go down to city council, really matching that up and not just having a blank slate of this is what we need you to do. With our membership orientations, we immediately don't talk about our organization. We ask each individuals, what do they love? What do they desire? What do they want to see for their community? And so we kind of center our work in aspirations and joy. And I just think that that keeps us connected so much. It's literally a family. We look at each other as family. When someone hurts, we're hurting. and we just had a very hurtful week. All of us were down because one of our members were hurt, and that's because we've built this family over 15 years, and there's so many of us who have connected, and even now thinking about it, and everybody who kind of reflects on our 15 years saying, I was so joyful when you guys did the events in the park. So we used the public space, we used the park. We knew that was neutral ground for all families of all ages. We used music, food, before you even kind of talk about what your initiatives are, what you're doing. And so art, being sociable, and being okay with planning things that are sociable. That is how people really let their guards down and connect. And then eventually you can say, hey, we have this initiative. We really need your expertise. You are a real estate agent, or you are a developer, or you are an architect. And we have something that we think that will be great for you. And that has been, I would say, hopefully those are some practical tips. I'm very proud of what we've built. Definitely look us up on YouTube and social media to see some of our work over the years. These were all residents in the community who had things that they aspired to be that gave them joy, and we provided a platform for them to do that.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So we did a study about 10 years ago as the first studies with NYU of purpose in the workplace and about fulfillment. And this will get to topic, don't worry. What was interesting, it's
I'm just a timekeeper.
okay. It was that my grandfather used to always quote Henry Kissinger, may he not rest in peace. But he used to always say, what questions do you have for my answers? Which
Right.
So we did the study, and what was really interesting is the majority of people working in healthcare, nonprofits, education are unfulfilled at work. And we found people in jobs that should never be fulfilled that are deeply fulfilled in their work. And there were a bunch of things that drove that. But the biggest one was reflection. Nothing in life is meaningful. Even if you're saving babies every day, nothing in life has meaning if you don't reflect on it. Reflection is the act of actually giving meaning to something. Without that, it's just activity. Even if it's doing amazing work, it's just activity. And I remember I created a program when I was at the University of Michigan as an undergrad where we would take students out and teach in the local prisons. And everyone said without exception, this is their favorite class they took at Michigan, despite it being taught by a peer. And it's not because of just the time we spent in the actual correction facility. It's because it took an hour to drive there, an hour to drive back. I guess what happened during that hour there and the hour back? It was reflection, it was crying, it was relating it to their own lives. We need that reflection built into service. And when it becomes transactional, it's one of the first things that leaves. So I just encourage you to think about, not to add more costs to your staffing, but to think about how do you enable that reflection? And the second thing is building on that. And I haven't done this, but it's just sort of an idea that came to me is just, I think talking about sort of the us and them mentality, the charity mentality around this is also just get people to reflect on what could you do to actually serve your own community that you're living? How could you help build connection? Help them realize that there's need where they are as well. And that I think a lot of nonprofits have more volunteers than they know what to do with. I had a friend who said, if I get another volunteer, I'm going to go out of business. If you're in that position where you have a lot of friends, challenge them to think about what could you do in your neighborhood? What could you do for your neighbors? How could you actually serve in a different way as well? So just would love for people to experiment with. How do we challenge people to think that way?
I love that. But I want to shift for a second. There's a lot of people here, and we thought we just had people at tables. You almost thought Beyonce was going to be here. I mean, yeah, close second. So maybe just a couple of minutes with somebody right next to you. And it says 10 minutes on here's what Maria put on the sheet, but I'm going to probably cut it down to 3 minutes, maybe 4, right? As you are thinking about some service activity that you do at home or something that you are actually leading, what's one act that you can do once you get back home that can actually turn this into something that builds connection and mutuality? So start now. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Garden. Work with us.
All righty. Thank you. Okay, I'm corralling you back to the middle. Okay, there are people still talking. I used to work for the YMCA, and we would say, if you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 1 time. Stacy, you work for the Y, and you're still talking. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 2 times.
Thank you. Well, I no, no. I was calling you out, Stacy. I love you. Stacy and I used to be coworkers when I worked at the YMCA, so I can call her out. But I would do that to anybody. So, okay. So 10 minutes left. Thank you so much for this. So in maybe another 3 minutes, I'd love to see if there's somebody who wants to share something very important they heard in their conversation. If not, we'll take a couple of questions. Anybody, something very important they want to share? Going once, twice. Okay. There's a couple of questions, right? You have a question. Speak really loud.
Our org is going to be significantly impacted by the SNAP benefit shut-off in November, and we're trying to figure out like how to avoid volunteer fatigue and overwhelm while also meeting a really practical need.
Yeah.
Curious if you can speak to that.
Any good luck. It's on that.
Yeah.
You know, as I also have had the privilege as part of what I did at state level doing disaster management. But I also think there's a lot of lessons we can take from disaster management. I always say that's actually where the secret sauce is, because you look at what happens.
Yep.
But one of the keys to that, there are 4 C's, and I wrote them down to make sure I said them right. There are 4 C's in disaster management. It's communication, coordination, continuity, and collaboration. And that happens all the time as all of the organizations that are active during disaster continue to meet pre-disasters. They're meeting all the time. And I think right now we stand at a moment in time when service organizations can either sort of see the cliff and become fatigued, or we can choose to collaborate in ways that nonprofits, frankly, have never collaborated before. Because the truth is, we build our own silos. We get protective over our own space and dollars. And right now, we can choose to make a massive shift in that culture and collaborate. And so, what we see happening in Arkansas, what we encourage through some of our work, what we see happening at regional level is, people are having to come together. So every organization that's providing services associated with SNAP or anything else, you're going to have to come together at the table, think about how you share this crisis, and then look at the unique gifts that each of your organization brings and how can you collectively serve people. Because no single organization will survive trying to continue to function as a single organization.
Yeah. I have one small thing that came to mind as I was listening to that was just, again, going back to the workplace, when you think about burnout, how much you work actually is a major variable, obviously, but perhaps equally big is whether or not you process emotions. People who at the end of the day, even if it's long and hard, if they have someone who can process that experience with, to do that reflection, it actually removes a lot of that. And most burnout is actually just calcified, unprocessed emotion. And if you can actually create the space for people to process emotion, they can work a lot and still not be burnt out. But it's that calcification that actually creates the damage.
And that's a lot of what the disaster organizations do. Those VOADs, they come together at the end of every day during disaster, and they're processing. They're processing, supporting each other.
And I would say find some additional volunteers, because this is an emergency at the same time, and people get their best in times of emergency. So there's one quick one here. Yep, really loud.
I'm just going to build a little bit on that. An interesting answer, the processing, like, I don't know if you have an example of how you created space for that within the org that you work with, or how's that? I mean, I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure what it needs in practice.
So if you look at the research, like one of the biggest predictors of success is whether or not you have a best friend at work. And that's because the best friend at work is the person that you generally process stuff with. It's the person you go to lunch with and complain and process something out. Otherwise, it's often done with like a spouse or someone at home, which, and it's usually about relationships that people are processing. It's really about the substance of it. It's about the emotional journey. By creating those friendships between people, pairing people up, creating that intimacy of the dyad instead of it being like a big group often is what makes most people comfortable doing that.
Can I add to that? I just want to add to that too. Not too long ago, I implemented the Joy Grant for our staff. It's an intentional $200 reimbursement for them to experience joy in any way they see fit, outside of food and alcohol. But one thing that I do with them all the time, the reason I established it is that I told them I'm very transparent about reflection. So so I think sharing that you do it and letting folks know that this is a place for that, that we're going to do that as we debrief what we just learned, what we just have. I think just expressing that to people that you are doing intentional things. Like I will isolate myself, journal about something, even now as we were filming and reflecting on our last 15 years, we're all stopping and saying, oh, when we heard this interview, it made me feel this way. And because we're constantly connected and co-creating together, we all feel it's a safe space to do that. And it's a part of our meetings. That's the first thing we do is reflection on how you feeling today, what's going on, just it's a common practice.
Perfect. So we got to get ready to close in a bit. So just in a minute, each person, well, a minute each maybe. What's something burning you want to share with the group, or what's the takeaway that you would want them to walk away with? I'll start with Aaron, and then we'll come back.
And I unfortunately have to run after this. So would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, folks. And if there's ways we want to collaborate, would love to connect on that. I would just share like the broader vision of what we're doing. In 1912, the president at the time created the Chamber of Commerce because they were scared of the communists were coming. And they needed to bring business together to help design America around business. And they did a hell of a job. We've got a company that is 1000% optimized for corporations. It has gotten us a lot of wealth, but it's also created a lot of the challenge. So we founded the U.S. Chamber of Connection because we need to now redesign our society around connection. We need to all come together. And right now we're a very fragmented field. We need to come together to be able to address connection. We need to be able to create a force that is undeniable, that no one can shut down, that redesigns around what we know from science is the thing that drives every single thing that matters in our society. And it's time that we get really loud, get really, really in everyone's face about this, because everyone knows it's true once they hear it.
Yes, does, but let's. One thing that I noticed when you tell people to connect, a couple of people tensed up. So even in the space now, we were uncomfortable with connected. We did it spontaneously. We felt oh God, I gotta move my chair. And so just to be, trying to help other people connect and your own self might feel some anxiety in doing that is what we might have to focus on, I think, as practitioners and people in this work. Our bodies tell us how we feel, even if we don't want it to. And so burnout, I listened to this lady who talks about burnout being a love language to your body. Your body is saying, yeah, you know what? It's enough. And so I think if we really want to do this work and truly want to have connection, we do have to connect with ourselves and know, why did we tense up to talk to our neighbor? And how could we break down that feeling, or whatever that feeling is? How do we get to the root of that feeling? Yeah, it's weird. Society's been weird. We had COVID, but we're going to have to really break down that anxiety of reconnecting with each other. And so again, I go back to joy is usually the starting point, and it's joyful meeting and talking to folks you don't know, right? You're going to feel something after that. And so just really reflecting on you and doing better as you connect with others.
Goodness, hello. Now I can't think. One. Oh gosh. One, I would say, because this past year and a half have had the opportunity to be deep in rural community in Arkansas, traveling the state. I am extremely hopeful. Because what I see at the local level are people full of hope. We did listening sessions that were just open to anyone that wanted to come, and people showed up. People of all walks of life, from all political persuasion, showed up. They were just showing up because there was a safe space to come and talk about engagement in their community, and they were hopeful. I think we also need to pay attention to Trust for Civic Life, More in Common report, which is also spoken to, that the American people have said, if there's a common goal that could come alongside each other and work on, they're ready for that. And they think that's what will bring healing. And so the connection isn't just about dialogue. And that was sort of our immediate response. I think a couple of years ago, we saw a lot of dialogue groups spin up, and not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that was sort of the approach. And what we're hearing from people is dialogue is not enough. And what they want is to actually come alongside. And I think that's what we see in disaster. There is an immediate common goal that we can all relate to. And so it's easy to then connect. And you see everything fall to the wayside. So I see a lot of hope, and I'm excited. And again, I think we have an opportunity, even though it's a great challenge, to choose in this sector, especially the nonprofit sector, to start collaborating more across organizations to do the work really and truly collaboratively, not collectively, but collaboratively, in a way that engages people and provides increased opportunity. And then I'm going to put a plug in for a book. It's an old book, but my mentor gave it to me. She passed away 3 years ago. I read this book every couple of years. It is called By People. If you're as old as me, you'll remember a great leader in our field, Susan Ellis. But this is a history of volunteerism in America. And I also just want to say, we are really the only country in the world who is built on a fabric of volunteerism.
Yep.
And that's what participatory democracy is. And we have proven in this country time and time again, through war, through depression, through all of it, that we, the people, can solve the problem. And that we will and do come together in times of great stress to build a better democracy. And so I see an opportunity for that. I believe that. I think this book captures that. It's part of why I go back and read it every couple of years, to just be reminded that we have something unique in this country that is worth holding on to and celebrating. And it is we, the people, and we need to be connected. Woo! Oh.
So I think we're over by a minute, but if you just indulge me for a second, I'd like to thank the panelists. So if you'd like to thank them with me. Oh. These issues that we have, these seeds of connection that we should go home and try and plant, you all are already doing it. I always remind people of 3 things you can do as you are a resident of a local community. As you're walking through your neighborhood, look somebody in the eye and say hello or good morning. It actually makes them feel like they're part of something bigger.
Crazy.
Crazy. Find a neighbor or the crazy person who you might should get to know, and you might find them less crazy. Invite them all out for coffee, sit on their porch and have a drink. Or find some type of opportunity, some service opportunity to get connected to in your community. Service that is relational, is repetitious in person, and it builds out mutuality, actually is transformational service, and we think everybody should be engaged with. The other night, while I was up insomnia, I was watching a documentary about Ambassador Andrew Young, and it was about the hard work that he's done over the years. And at the end, he said this quote that sticks with me. And he says, everybody wants to go out and change the world. Go change the world. And what if the world is right outside where you are right now? So we all have the opportunity to change the world right now, right outside where we are right now. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening.